Marketer of the Day, number 461. Your Retirement Game Plan and the American Dream Revisited. How to plan for the future and pursue your ultimate passion with Gary Sirak. Hey everyone, we're so glad you're listening today. We're talking right now with Gary Sirak, and Gary has been helping other people achieve their American dream for the last 35 years, and he's the president of Sirak Financial Services, which is a company that will celebrate its 60th anniversary this year. And Gary has written two books. The first is called If Your Money Talked, What Secrets Would It Tell? That's a book about personal finance and the most common mistakes people make with their money. And he also has a book called The American Dream Revisited, Ordinary People, Extraordinary Results. So lots of fun stuff to talk about. How are you doing today, Gary?
Oh, we're doing really well. It's unseasonably warm in Canton, Ohio, like 50 degrees. It's really strange, but fun.
Yeah, I mean, it mixes things up, right? Gives you some variety in life.
Absolutely, and especially when you expect snow and gray and you get sun and 50, you say, wow, this is pretty nice. So
Yeah.
we're having a good day.
Well, great. Glad to hear it. So what is on your mind recently as far as your business, as far as things you're seeing? I mean, what has you fired up lately?
Well, it's been very fascinating. I've been working with a lot of people that are entering retirement, and I'm really curious about what they're going to do next. So figuring out the money side is clearly something we do. We do that for a living, and have been doing that for a very long time. But what we're finding is that so many people are entering retirement without a clue of what's next. So I've been asking that question a lot and getting some very unique answers, mostly not very good answers, I might add. And people don't really have really not spending time thinking about what the future looks like.
Scary stuff. So maybe they've been going about things day by day, year by year, and then realizing, oh, shoot, I have to actually prepare for something.
Absolutely. And it's not the money side of it. I mean, Robert, most of these people are okay. They're not going to be rolling in dough, some of them, and some of them are. But it's not that. It's just, you have this whole life you've been living. You spent 40 years working in your business. Now you're not going to be. What happens on that first day when you wake up and you don't have to go to work? What does the day look like for you? And they have no clue. So it's really been kind of fun and interesting asking questions. I've been taking a lot of notes. Might turn into my next book. So it's just trying to figure out how they're thinking about it, and mostly they're not.
Well, awesome. Well, let's get people thinking. So when you ask people about, what does retirement look like for you, and they don't really know what even a typical day would be like, how do you go about cracking that problem? What sort of things do you start investigating or asking about?
Well, it pretty much comes down to having a game plan. And I start at a really basic place. I say, okay, your first day of work is over, your last day of work is over, your first day of not working is today. What do you do? I mean, what happens? How do you motivate yourself? And they all look at me, well, I'm going to take a vacation. I said, you don't understand. The rest of your life is a vacation. What are you going to do? And they don't really have an answer. And then we get into discussion, and I say, well, let me ask you, what would you like to do? And they say, well, we don't know. And then I hand them a piece of paper called a wish list. And I said, okay, there's 100 spaces on this paper. Tell me what you would like to do, and all the things you haven't done in your life, why don't you write them down? And then I give them to them as homework and say, take that home with you, think about it a little bit, crack open a bottle of wine and put on some good music and whatever, and really think about what you really wished you would have done over the last 30, 40 years that you didn't do.
Well, interesting. Well, two things about that. One thing is I'm really curious about what some of those answers are and what the most common answers are. And then one thing that comes to mind about that is that maybe when people begin to write that sort of list down, that they might list a few obvious things or a few things that are on their mind. And because they have to fill out these 100 slots, maybe the middle ones will kind of be weird or just things they have to throw out there. But maybe after they go through this process and they list through enough and maybe exhaust the possibilities, maybe that last chunk of ideas, maybe those will be the real things they should do. Am I right, or am I on the right track there?
Well, there's some low-hanging fruit that they'll knock off right away, Robert. Oh, I want to go to Pittsburgh for 2 weeks. Whatever the thing is, I want to go spend 2 weeks in New York City. Whatever the place they want to go, whatever they want to do. There's always a vacation in there. I have someone going to Italy. They're going to do some kind of cruise. And I said, those are great. I said, but what happens after that? And then they get stuck. And what I find is they really can't even get close to 100. If they're getting 15 or 20, they're feeling good about themselves. And I'm looking at the 15 or 20 and saying, yeah, those aren't really very good. And they say, why? Well, I had one guy said, well, I want to learn how to speak Spanish. And I said, that's great. Where are you going to learn? How are you going to do it? Where are you going to practice? And he looked at me and said, well, I don't know. I just want to do that. And I said, okay. And it's funny because I saw that man 6 months later, and I asked him how he was going with Spanish. He looked at me like I was crazy. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, last time we got together 6 months ago, you wrote down that you were going to learn how to speak Spanish. And he started laughing. He said, yeah, I went to one class. I said, I never went back. Oh, I said, well, how that didn't work out well. I said, no, that was a terrible idea, Gary. So anyhow, so what happens is people don't really know, and I do something kind of cool. I make them go back to when they were younger, and I ask them what they used to really like to do when they were a kid. And when they're in high school, when they're in college, whatever. I said, what were the things you really liked to do when you were younger? And start thinking about those.
Interesting. So what kind of answers come from that?
Well, a whole variety. One individual realized that they absolutely loved music. They hadn't played in a very long time, and they literally went over and signed up to take guitar lessons. I thought that was good. Another person decided, and it's funny, in the same music realm, they used to love to go to shows. Well, they aren't going to go to rock shows anymore, but what they've been doing is they've been going to live music events, and they haven't done that in probably 20 years. And so they're doing things they just hadn't done and hadn't spent the time. Another one used to like to go to bed and breakfast. They would go find bed and breakfast. Well, they had stopped doing that 10, 15 years ago for some reason, and now they're selecting bed and breakfast all over the country to go visit. And they're researching it. And so they'll go somewhere, instead of staying in a hotel, they stay in bed and breakfast, and they've made all kinds of friends with these people. So it's pretty neat, Robert.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and it sounds like, I mean, there's a couple of patterns I'm hearing in some of these answers, and one seems to be that the plans that are bad or that aren't thought through or that just fall through seem to be where they just say, I'm going to do this one thing just for the activity of it. They almost treat it like homework, but then the dreams that do last are the ones where they say, well, here's what I've always wanted to do. Here's something that I wanted to do as a kid, but then that middle adult part of life talked them out of it. So then they're saying, well, here's what I really wanted to do all along. So now I'll set this goal and then maybe backtrack a couple steps a little and figure out what are the things I need to put in motion to get to that end goal, sort of.
Absolutely. And you hit a really cool point here. One of the gentlemen that I worked with, and it's not just gentlemen, by the way, there's plenty of women in the game too, but there's one of the gentlemen I worked with was really interested in helping other people achieve their dreams, their American dreams. And he and I had a very spirited conversation because of my book, The American Dream Revisited, and him having this desire to really pass on some of the knowledge that he had received in his lifetime and figuring out how to do that and how to mentor people. He was just all about it. And he really has done a fantastic job of being involved in systems to help younger people get, his wisdom, and he shares it very generously. And he donates a tremendous amount of time. He'll go do lectures all over, and he'll just tell people what he's done in his life, and he'll offer his expertise for free.
Well, awesome. So, I mean, what sorts of things do people need to have figured out? Like you said that, a lot of people have the money situation figured out more or less. Might be some, might be a lot, might be not a lot. But then some people are kind of stuck about filling in that wish list or what that activity is. So, I mean, what else really needs to be figured out?
Well, here's the real thing. What I've learned is purpose is a big part of this. And what I've found is that if you don't have purpose, you can have miserable things happen to you in life. And so I'm in the life insurance business, financial services. We've been doing that for 35 years. It's one of the products and the services we offer. And what I've learned is that if people don't have purpose, they don't have something they really are motivated to do, they get very lazy, and they also have some health issues that seem to crop up on them quickly. And I can't tell you how many people have retired and died that I know within a 2-year period, but it's a very large number. And the ones that have happened to are the ones who just did not have a game plan. They didn't know what they were going to do. Obviously not all of them, but a fairly large number of them just didn't survive very long because they didn't really know what the rest of their life was going to look like. And for whatever reason, they're no longer on this planet.
Oh wow, so that's sort of scary. So basically, so knowing what to do after retirement is not just a matter of staving off the boredom, having something to do, but it's if you don't have a purpose and if your plan is just to sit around the house all day, then I mean you're not long for this world.
Well, and that's, again, I don't have actuarial numbers to back me up. I just have real life people that I used to see that I don't see anymore. And 2 years, 3 years, I had one in 6 months. Literally, this lady retired, and 6 months, the day she retired, they pronounced she was diagnosed with cancer, and 6 months to the day we buried her. I had another one who was in less than 2 months. A very good friend of mine from high school. And he and I were having lunch together at this really neat Amish restaurant. We're talking, and he said, Gary, I've decided to retire. And I said, that's great, Dave. And he said, yeah. He said, in 3 months, I'm going to take my Social Security. I'm good to go. And I said, perfect. He lasted exactly 6 months. It's just incredible to me. And, so I look at that and I say, there's something that I don't grasp. It's way bigger than I am, but I do know it's important to have purpose. It's important to be motivated to get up in the morning. It's important that you got to do the things you need to do for yourself because health's a factor. I have one guy, and this is kind of a cool story. This guy never exercised his whole life. I mean, and he looked like he never exercised. Some of us look like we exercise. We don't exercise so much. This guy, you wouldn't mistake him for that. Anyhow, he just was in terrible shape, but when he retired, he said on his wish list the thing he's going to do is start going to health club 3 days a week. So he joined a health club, and I will tell you, he has done that, and he looks amazing. I mean, like two different people. He's in the best shape I've ever seen him. He looks like he's 10 years younger, and he's really, really a motivated guy. I mean, he's there every morning, whatever, 3 mornings a week or whatever, and it's just impressive. But that was the number one thing on his list. And he said, Gary, this is what I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to do it. And then he went out and did it.
So what's the secret to some of these people? I mean, it's one thing to make a plan or make a decision, but it's another thing completely to follow through and to be able to do that day after day. So what do you think some of these people did to not only set a good plan, but also stick with it?
Well, part of it is they graded themselves lightly. They weren't harsh about themselves, so they didn't, they weren't giving themselves C's and D's because they didn't do something perfectly the first week. They really put a plan together. It was a simple plan, maybe to some degree, and they followed it, and they just honored what they said they were going to do. I mean, I have some people say, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and I'm saying, there's no way you're going to do all that. I said, isn't going to happen. You're going to do some of it, and then maybe you can do more of it as you go along. It's like trying to understand your new job in the first day or the first week or the first year. I hire people all the time, and I always make them go back and look at where they came from and what they knew when they got here, not what they don't know. And that really helps them. They get a chance to go back. The other thing I found very interesting is some of these people who have retired have looked for mentors in retirement. They've gone to other people who are retired and said, hey, how did you do? What do you do? How do you keep your time? How do you manage your life? And that's been very helpful. There's a number of people out there that are very willing to share how they've successfully managed to retire and be happy.
And what are these types of people called? Just retirement mentors?
I don't know. I've never given them a name. That's a good question. I've never thought about a name on them, but they really are retirement mentors. But I've never come up with anything to even think about how to classify them. But it's funny, they're really out there, and I can go find, in fact, it's interesting, there's a place, a coffee shop. I'm a coffee shop guy. My book, The American Dream Revisited, was because I was sitting in a coffee shop called Karma Cafe one morning. I order mochas every time I go into these shops. There's 4 of them I travel. Well, one of the shops I go to, There's a group of men who meet every single morning in that coffee shop, and they hold a court of sorts. And there's one man that leads it, and they all have in their discussions. And I've sat in a few, maybe 4 or 5 times when I had some time. I'd sit down and just listen to them and didn't really say much, just more interested in observation. But they meet every day. They're there 5 days a week, this group of men. My father-in-law retired, and he retired to a donut shop. Every morning he would go to the donut shop at 7:30, and there'd be the same group of guys there, and for the next 2 hours he would be eating donuts and drinking coffee with these guys. And I asked Ralph one time, I said, Ralph, is the coffee any good? He said, it's terrible. I said, are the donuts any good? He said, they're worse. I said, why do you go there? He said, great guys.
Interesting, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I mean, so it sounds like what's helped this person in particular is having some kind of a routine and some kind of a community mastermind, a group of people. That way you have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. You can keep the brain active, talk about stuff, as opposed to just sitting around.
And that's exactly the point. And having that routine might be the most critical thing of all, because we're always on routines when we go to work. But if we're not working, we don't have a routine any longer, so we have to create and develop a new one.
Yeah, and as you're explaining a lot of this, I mean, it sounds like this whole idea of retirement. Everyone thinks that it's just like, okay, great, I finished everything I was supposed to do. Now I can just kick back. But it sounds like this idea of retirement is just a different life configuration, and it reminds me a lot of when I was working a 9 to 5, and then I had to figure out how to change over to this like full-time self-employed thing, and a lot of people didn't get it. People were just like, well, what do you mean you need to figure out what your day is going to be like when you're self-employed? I'm telling them, well, if I don't have somewhat of a plan, especially for those first couple of months when I'm full-time, then the day's just going to get away from me. If I just take a vacation, or if I just watch TV all day and then I hope that things will figure themselves out, they won't, because I'll just get used to this habit of laziness and of not taking action. So if anything, when I quit the 9 to 5 and went to full time, I had to push myself a little bit more to get used to this new lifestyle, this new daily schedule. And I'm really glad that I didn't just get lazy and didn't just sit around in my pajamas all day, because I know that if I had, then I would have just been a downward spiral, and I probably would have had to go back to the 9 to 5 day-to-day stuff.
Well, and that's exactly the point. You've hit it on the head, and what you described is exactly what these people are coming to focus with. All of a sudden, they're not 9 to 5 anymore. They're whatever they want to be, whenever they want to be it, and they've got to figure out what they're going to do. So my wife is a master gardener. She spends her time in the garden. And when it's winter, she can't really garden, although I'm sure she's out today because it's a nice day. She was out all week and it was nice. But the funny thing about it is, if she isn't out in the garden, she's working on something that relates to gardening. It's remarkable how much time this woman spends on a garden. By the way, we have beautiful gardens. And when I talked to her, because she retired from her job a long time ago, and she said, yeah, it's just what I really want to do for the rest of my life. She said, I love playing in the dirt. I love making things look pretty, and she happens to be incredibly good at it. And she's not bored. It's really pretty unique. She's reading gardening magazines, deciding what she's going to do, moving. We have 2 projects, and I say she won't even let me look in the garden unless I'm like away from it, so I can't screw something up. But yeah, she won't let me in it to do any work because she says I'm dangerous. And I probably am, by the way.
Well, interesting. So she's found her hobby that will sustain her forever, and we need to find those hobbies or activities so that way we don't fall into just all the bad stuff that comes with not having enough things to do. And I'm curious about how these sorts of thoughts tie into your books, because we mentioned that you have your American Dream book, and then you also have the If Your Money Talked. So can you tell us about these books and other things you have going on too?
Sure. The book, the money book for sure, If Your Money Talked, What Secrets Would It Tell, was really started in a flight to Las Vegas on a plane. My wife and I were going for a long weekend, and we were listening to people telling us how they're going to get rich in Vegas. Of course, that didn't really work. And then 3 days later, as we're flying back, I mean, the stories were wild. I just listened, and all these crazy stories. And then So I really didn't have, I didn't really know these people. We were in a charter. Coming home 3 days later, the plane, instead of being noisy and wild and crazy, it's like we had been to 3 funerals, we're waiting for our fourth. And what I realized, all these people were talking how sad it was. They'd lost all their money. They had to get second jobs. They had credit cards now to pay off they didn't have before. One guy actually said he was afraid his wife would divorce him when she found out what he did. I don't know what he did, but it wasn't good. Anyway, but it was story after story after story. And I realized all these people were going out there thinking they were going to get rich in Las Vegas, which obviously doesn't happen. But I decided to write the book after that and said, okay, this isn't going to work. So how does it tie into what I'm writing? It ties into because you have to have some money to be comfortable if you're going to attempt to retire. Again, some people retire into another full-time job because they want to or they have to financially. I like the part if you want to, not that you have to. So money's a big deal. So that was book one. Book two, The American Dream Revisited, was really about the fact that we have so many opportunities in this country and that our younger population needs to recognize that there's all sorts of things that they can do down the road, that it's not as grim and ugly as people paint it, and that you just have to look at your opportunities and look for your spots and take advantage of what's out there. Unfortunately, lots of people don't. There's a very negative vibe that goes around this country and today, and I just didn't like that, so I wrote a book opposite of that.
Well, great, and I'm definitely on your side as far as I can't stand the doom and gloom and people telling us about, there's this collapse going to happen or this fund's going to run out. I'm thinking like, okay, well, it's good that we know it now, but let's not kind of steer that into somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you mentioned that there are some opportunities that are out there that people are just like ignoring or not taking advantage of. So can you give us a taste of that? Do you have an easy way of kind of unpacking a little example like that?
Yeah, sure. Education's a great one. I have a young man who I really like, who's a really nice young man, except he didn't really go to school. And so when it came to the point where he was trying to figure out what he was going to do, he was in school, but he wasn't in school, if you know what I mean. He was there, but he wasn't really engaged. So we had a really lively, spirited conversation about what education means. And I said, really, if you're going to try and run a business, you need to learn basics, and you can't learn them. I think education is very good. I think you need to take some courses about business. I think you need to learn some things you didn't learn in school. You have to go back and do this. And he said, but I don't have the money to pay for it. And I said, well, there's all kinds of ways to do it. Why don't we look and explore the best way to pay for your college education? And we did. We looked at different opportunities for him, and he ended up going to a state, kind of a local school. And he's been there in his second year. He's getting great grades. He's working part-time for a company, making whatever he's making per hour. And his loans are very, very minimal, and he's getting a very good education. And when I meet with him periodically, I'm very impressed with how he is maturing and getting things together. And quite frankly, when I met him, he didn't have any of it together. He was just a bit of a lost soul. So I like that. And it's just opportunities. He's got these opportunities. Now he's taking advantage of them. He's just one of many. So I think we have lots of opportunities in the world. I have people I hire in my company, and I ask them to do certain things, and some people do them and some people don't. The ones who don't are no longer here, and the ones who do progress and earn a really nice living. It's not rocket science. It's just putting effort into taking advantage of opportunities and doing the things that other people aren't really willing to do.
And what I'm hearing a lot of from this couple of examples that you laid out, and also with that retirement problem, what I'm hearing a lot of is that maybe sometimes people give up at the first speed bump, or they give up too soon, when it should be a matter of figuring out the path to get from point A to point B. And maybe in a certain situation, it might mean going back to school for a little bit, or getting some kind of a certificate or some kind of a degree, or maybe pursuing things that they might have just completely just blanketly written off, and maybe they need some kind of an outside mentor or someone to make some kind of a step-by-step plan for them, so that way maybe they have these extra options that they otherwise have just completely written off before.
And that is exactly the point. So when I wrote The American Dream Revisited, I interviewed 25 people from all around the country. And I interviewed them to find out what their American dream was, how they had achieved it. And the fascinating thing is American dreams are different for many people. All 25 of them had a different view of what their American dream was than the next person. So everybody says, oh, the American dream is this, and I disagree. It's not that. It's whatever you want it to be. And what I also found out is all these people, their dreams changed as they matured and got older and had larger families, or the kids moved out of the house, or their business changed, their dreams changed. So that was very interesting. And there were 25 I interviewed. I ended up writing about 13 of them. But one of the key factors in the 13, I found there were some traits that they all had in common. And you just hit the number one. That is a refuse to quit, refuse to fail. They just refused. This whole group of people, all 25 of them, were relentless in their pursuit of not failing. They just refused to give up. And when the time came for them to make hard decisions, they made the decisions and said, I'm going to forge on. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Well, that's great advice and great stuff that we should all follow. So always find a way to forge on and course correct or pivot or whatever term you want to use. So that way you can get to where you want to be. I think the quote something like Tony Robbins says something like, be flexible in the way you get there, but stay true to what that goal is. I'm totally butchering it, but I mean, same sort of idea. So those both sound like really great books. So there's If Your Money Talked, What Secrets Would It Tell, which helps people avoid a lot of those common mistakes. And then The American Dream Revisited, where you talk to those 25 people and reported on the 13 about that everyone has a different American dream and that can change over time and what kind of things people did. And so where can people find out about you and get these books and see everything else you have going on?
Well, they can go to my website, which is Gary Sirak, SIRAK.com, and we have a lot of information on there, and even a scorecard for the American Dream, which it allows you to score yourself where you are with your own American Dream. It's free, but you can download it and play with it and say, wow, it shows me where I am and where I need to be to get to the American Dream, at least your own personal American Dream. That's on the website. The books can be purchased there. They can also be bought through Amazon and ebooks, iBooks, all that stuff. So
super great. So GarySirak.com, that's SIRAK, is the place to get to everything that you need to get to get that scorecard. It's free. Get the books, and we'll see you over there at GarySirak.com. And once again, that's GarySirak.com, GarySirak.com. So lots of things for us to think about and do. It's never too late for us to get on the right track to wherever we want to be, whether we're at the retirement age or reinventing our life or figuring out where we're at. I hope that this episode and the advice that we gave today really helped everyone out who's listening. So make sure you check out Gary's website and maybe listen to this episode in about a month's time to figure out how you're making progress, where you're at. And thanks so much, Gary, for stopping by and for telling us these things that we need to know and for sharing these cool stories. Really appreciate it and really appreciate you.
Robert, thank you. This was a pleasure. And these are fun when I get to do these, so thanks.
Thanks for listening to today's program. Start from the beginning or view past episodes at marketeroftheday.com/episodes.